G'day folks, AOS Coach here, and we are going to be talking, I guess, a post-event discussion and wrap up from the World Championships of Warhammer. It was a tournament that happened about a month ago. It was a best of the best style tournament that took place over in Atlanta, Georgia. We are going to talk about, reflect, discuss the good, the bad, is it an event that we want to go to in the future? What were our highlights? We're going to talk about it all. And I am joined by Henry Wagner, making his channel debut, and Tom Oliver, who you may know from a recent Maggot-kin of Nurgle chat. I say recent, it was like 6 months ago, but it's still recent in my heart. G'day, welcome both, and World Championships of Warhammer. What a crazy event that was. Henry, do you want to introduce yourself to the fine folks who may not know who you are?
So hello everyone, I'm Henry. I live up in Toowoomba in Queensland. I've been playing wargames for about 20 years now, since primary school, when I started back in fantasy. Kind of jumped around, whole bunch of different games, played pretty much every game under the sun. But about 2 years ago, I started my kind of side business, Polymath Tabletop, and I've been really kind of diving into all aspects of the hobby, trying to excel at every different aspect. And yeah, kind of started taking AOS a bit more seriously when I started all that. And that got me all the way over to Atlanta as of about a month ago. And it was a fantastic experience. So keen to talk about it a bit more with everyone here.
Yeah, I'm super curious to hear from you both, considering that my experience was being one of the tournament organizers. So running around, making sure hopefully your games ended on time. I'm sure there'll be some things you want to mention at this particular point. But I was one of the tournament organizers. You both played. So I'd be really curious to hear, your experience. But Tom, people may know you from Nurgle. Do you want to introduce yourself again for the people who may have missed it and they're going to watch that Nurgle video straight after this one?
Yeah, sure. Basically what Henry said. I've been playing games for about 20 years. I started in primary school, jumped over to AOS about 18 months ago though, and I've been playing largely Nurgle, painted up a few other factions in that time, and I'm about to start mucking around with a new faction heading into next year, which is pretty exciting. But sort of jumped straight into the tournament scene, and was lucky enough to get over to the States in a pretty short time of playing this game.
So, maybe I'll share a little bit about the World Championships and you guys can kind of add some like overlaying goodness, right? So the World Championships is a new concept to Games Workshop. This is an event that they are running, and there was a series of events across the world, independent as well as Games Workshop run events, where if you won the event, you would get what's called a golden ticket, and that allowed you access to this particular tournament. So the World Championships wasn't something that you could just physically buy a ticket to and attend like your traditional tournament. It is something that basically was a reward for frontline gaming events and events like mine, Sydney GT, and a lot of events across the world. Right, you had Australia, Belgium, Canada, China, Denmark, England, France. Like there's heaps of Poland, Philippines, Scotland, Singapore, like Sweden, USA. There was something like 87 players who attended. Obviously, there's probably a bunch of people who couldn't make it. So big pool of international people, all vying and fighting for the chance to call themselves the world champion of Warhammer. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Henry?
I think me and Tom are both here just waiting for the other one to start, but I'll start it. I think it's a fantastic thing that GW are doing. They're really kind of pushing that they are offering a kind of the top level, best of the best style event. Previously, that's always been run by kind of people external to the company, which is always good because a lot of the tournaments that are run for the game are run by people external. But to have kind of something that is the official 100%, this is the G-Dub, this is the World Championships of Warhammer. It's an awesome thing that they're going to kind of push ahead and kind of build up to be the big flagship event that it can be.
Yeah, so last year while they had an event, it was the finals for the US Open. This was the first, I guess, World Championships of Warhammer, so a very different event. And there's some really interesting things that played out during the event, especially the double elimination, which I'm sure you'll have some opinions on. But Tom, anything else you'd add about just generally the World Championships?
Yeah, so it's not just World Championships for Age of Sigmar. It was a World Championships for the core game systems for Games Workshop Sans Middle-earth, which I really hope goes next year because it's a great game to see being played on tabletop. But it wasn't. The really cool thing that I didn't know heading into this was that it wasn't just World Championships from a competitive level. There was also a grand narrative event at the convention, which I got a really exciting chance to go and spend some time in there, just walking around. I was like, which is where people were playing like purely narrative-focused gaming, and people in costume like running events within that and all that stuff, which is really, really cool. And I had no idea that existed in the world ever, and made me feel really bad that we've probably ruined the games because that seemed how they were intended to be played, not us getting all hung up on places. But it was that was a really cool aspect of it that they organised.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because you did have so first off, it was Age of Sigmar, which was about 90 players. 40k had players. There was a kill team tournament as well as Underworld. So they were the 4 core game systems. People were fighting over not only their own individual rankings, but also there was a bit of a country competition going on. There was also a grand narrative, which was for 40k, which is incredibly awesome. Henry, what else was at the event?
So they had a kind of a big store as well at the front, which was really cool because you got to see a lot of the models that you don't really get to see at a lot of the shops, like a whole bunch of Forge World stuff, a whole bunch of exclusive merch as well. Like I picked up a couple of shirts that you literally can't buy anywhere else. So I actually played in a casual 40k one today, and I wore one of the shirts that I got over there, and everyone's like, crap, that's amazing. Where do you get this shirt? It's just like, oh, this is when I went over there. The only way to get it is to go to one of their big, cool events. So, but that was awesome. But kind of one of the biggest things that jumped out to me early was just how, like, there were so many people and you were surrounded by people who were all there because they are borderline obsessed with the exact same thing as you. And I've been to a couple of other big events. I've attended WTCs for War Machine. And just that feeling is like no other. Being in a room with 400, 500 other people that are all there for the same reason that you are is just fantastic. And it's awesome to see kind of the community come together behind these events.
Yeah, for me, like it was awesome to meet so many people that I haven't met on Twitter. Especially, I've been to a couple of American tournaments in the past, LVO, Adepticon, just to name a few, and I'll be going to LVO again next month. But I haven't really got a chance to kind of get to know the Europeans. So like hanging out with the French, hanging out with the Polish players, hanging out with Sweden, and like it was so cool to meet the all of the Europeans, and we all have that thing in common. Yeah, Tom, I see. Yeah, you're nodding your head. Have you got anything else to add?
Just mirroring that sentiment exactly. Like I met so many cool people over the 4 days, and it was really cool to see different gaming cultures in action. And see what that standard of play is like right across the world. It was a really unique experience, which I'm really thankful to have had. It was really, really cool.
Any particular insights from like that culture that maybe you'd want to share?
I think there was one of the biggest takeaways was that intent was so key, and even if there were language barriers or maybe even different interpretations of rules or what have you, it was really good. In all 8 of my games, I'll start the game off with that conversation of like, hey, let's declare intent before the game starts. If you want to make something happen, let's make it happen, and everybody was super on board to do that. So it was, the game, in games, the level of cooperation amongst these top level players was actually quite phenomenal from what I saw, and that was really, really heartening to see that the community is really cool on that front.
Henry, anything else that you'd want to call out here?
Oh no, just 100% kind of supporting what Tom was saying. Like when you are playing at such a high level, like millimeters matter. Like I had, and my opponents had tons of opportunities to kind of pick up on those little mistakes or not share a pertinent rule because you're so stressed and you're so focused about what you're doing. But the kind of the camaraderie as kind of like, hey, we're all here because we're all good at the hobby that we play and we spend our time in, was amazing. Like I had one game against a French player, and I apologize every time I say it, Everest, because I'm 100% sure I'm butchering that name. Where throughout one of his turns, he kind of said, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And then at the end of the turn, we realized he'd messed it up. But he just started panicking. And I was like, no, mate, it's fine. You've said it consistently throughout the turn. This is what you meant to do. You didn't move those models that extra inch. And he was just like, oh, thank you so much. It's like, no, like we're playing to intent. This is what you intended to do. But that's just a really good example, but that wasn't a unique experience. Like every single one of my games was that same level of, no, like we both know what you intended to do. You've said that you're intending to do it. Let's play it. Let's figure out this puzzle. I think Tom, after one of our games, we were talking about saying that we almost saw the turns as a puzzle to be solved, but we almost worked cooperatively in some points of that. Not that we wanted to not that I was gunning for my opponents to beat me, but kind of you presented the challenge and then we were keen to see if they could solve the puzzle and solve the problem and then what challenge they'd present to you, which is just amazing. And I haven't had that experience anywhere else.
I think for me, the really interesting part of the culture was, and I'm reminded of Mike Brandt, who is the head of global events and I guess was the face of the Games Workshop at the event. But he stood up when the event started and said, you're all losers. And it was really interesting that he kind of mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing, he did call you all losers, but I can't remember the exact sentence he quoted. But it was interesting because everyone in the room won their event to come in. And some of them won some massive events to get the spot. Yet winners, people who probably dominate in their local communities, who are maybe names who have been on podcasts and talked about their faction, and you see them on a tournament register and you're like, oh, I hope I avoid that person. Some of those people were going to go 0-5. Some of them were going to lose their first couple of games. And that was really weird spot to have that culture to go, right, well, you're all winners and you've all won something to get here, yet someone has to lose. So what was that going to do from a cultural perspective? Were people going to get emotional? Were people going to get flustered? Were people going to quit on the spot? And surprisingly, actually, I think to you, what you're both saying, the culture was very collaborative and people, regardless if they were losing their games or winning their games, I felt it was a really good vibe. Is it the same? Would you agree from the player's perspective? It seemed like everyone was just enjoying themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like in games, I like absolutely no issue. Like there are a couple of things that I think created some unnecessary tension, which is a structural component of the event, which I'll probably talk about later on. But as far as like playing the game together with another person, I didn't see any sort of that angle shooting, that those points of debate around really finicky stuff to the point where the game and the manner between two people was going to deteriorate to a point where like you couldn't play it out from a good time. We even had some teammates who went over who probably had some pretty heated starts to games and some interactions, and were able to then rebuild. But everyone sort of understood like when we're playing with World Championships, but World Championships are playing with toys is probably not something to get into fights over and all that sort of stuff. So that was amazingly positive. And some of the ways that even I have one game against one of the French players, Christophe, which was just one of the most, like Henry said, one of the most collaborative experiences of ever that I've had in a game. But it wasn't just during the game, like the 20-30 minutes after that game, we just spent like talking out like that was a really cool game, like had you done this or this gone your way or XYZ, it would have changed, or how if you're going to go play somebody else in this matchup ever again, you probably should have thought about this sort of thing. So it wasn't by any, for me, those sorts of experiences really didn't indicate that people were there to be cutthroat to really have a good time at the expense of others, which was good, which I think can be a connotation with higher level competition.
Yeah, like the minute you think about the best of the best, a bunch of winners getting together, most people's mind goes to worst case scenario, which is worst of the worst, cheating and bad experiences and salty players, and generally that wasn't true, and people came with a really good spirit. Obviously there's probably some somewhere, I'm not sugarcoating it, but it just seemed like most people were just really happy and just happy to be in the experience, wanted to win, but it wasn't at all costs. So Henry, take me back to maybe how you even got here, right? So you have done something, you've won something, or you've bribed the TO to get a golden ticket. How did you secure your ticket, and what faction did you just decide to bring?
So I think I actually got one of the first golden tickets that ever became available, because I got my golden ticket from my performance at CanCon. Right back at the start of the year. So I went undefeated and got 4th based on tiebreakers, which I was tremendously happy with. I'd taken Seraphon and an absolutely nasty list. I played several people that I play and we get along quite well, and they said after the game, it's just like, that was one of the most oppressive games I've ever played. Like, nothing against you, but that list is just unbearable. And I'm like, yeah, no, 100%. That's why I brought it. It's a really nasty list. And then after that, I heard from Clint that the golden tickets were up for grabs, and then he offered them to the 3 players that came ahead of me on the tiebreakers. But unfortunately, because it was an entirely unfunded ticket, they all turned it down, which is completely understandable once you start looking into the nitty-gritty of how much it actually costs to go over to these events. I very thankfully was in a position that I could go over. So I very, very graciously and I believe after I got the message, I just ran around like air punching, just dancing around like, yeah, I'm the best, I'm the greatest. But yeah, so that was how I got the ticket. And then after that, I was very sick of Seraphon, because before that, I basically only played Seraphon at events and was keen for something else. And I picked up a Sylvaneth army from one of my friends who was selling it on the cheap. And then figured something else like Sylvaneth would be kind of exactly what I need, a very kind of high skill cap army. And so I decided that I was going to take Sylvaneth. So I played around with a couple of random lists. And unfortunately, this kind of bit me a little bit, but there is a local GW Championship store in Queensland at Mount Gravatt, and they run tournaments semi-regularly. I think they run about 2 or 3 a year. And I always try and go to them because they're always, it's kind of a very good group of guys that goes to those events. But they also have a fairly heavy sports component. So they have a big split between battle, painting, and sports, and that all goes into their overall winner. And that was kind of the other reason that I decided to take Sylvaneth, was because I could build a very interactive list for my opponent. So unfortunately, that wasn't kind of what happened with how the scoring and the matrix worked for the World Championships. But that was kind of my thought process behind it. Bring a nice kind of, still a very strong list, but a more interactive list than kind of some of the more oppressive lists can be.
Cool. And I'm sure we'll get to maybe how it went and, did it play out to the way you wanted it to play out. But Tom, what about yourself? How did you secure your ticket, and what was the faction you ended up taking?
Yeah, so I had a slightly different route to Atlanta than Henry did. Australia started this year, it was like a first run of a league attached to the golden tickets organised by some dudes down in Melbourne, I believe, which meant that the events that were handing out golden tickets, as well as others, gain points on like a national ladder, which is sort of aside from our normal national masters ranking. And I got an email sort of September, around the same time as Sydney GT, and it was like, hey, you've qualified for this event down in Melbourne. It's this championship thing. I was like, oh, cool. basically the Australia, like that must be the Australia version of basically what the American event wound up being. I'll go down, like that'll be really fun. And went down and wound up doing really well at that event and secured a ticket through that. Based off my podium placing, coming second to Joel, who also came to Atlanta, and whichever way it worked out, it meant that I got a golden ticket and was very lucky enough to have a lot of my trip funded, which is what made it possible for me to go to Atlanta. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to scrap it with life going on. So so that was all. So I had the confirmation and the details to get to Atlanta, all of 18 days before the event. So it was a bit of a quick turnaround between, hey, you're able to go to Atlanta. Hey, like I already knew that I had the ticket, but in terms of like what did the funding look like and all that sort of stuff. So my ticket was booked 18 days before flying, and work was very thankful. Like they were like, yeah, absolutely go. That's great. You take some long service leave and all that sort of jazz. And so I've been playing, like I've said, I've been playing Nurgle pretty much the entire time that I've been playing Age of Sigmar. I'd just on a whim, because I've been playing Flies for a long time, on a whim for an event in Sydney, decided to pull out the Glock in about 6 weeks before we went to America, and just ran like a lolsy list. And I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And the event was, was a really great event, but I was like, I'm just going to do something different. So I was like, let's run this list. It has like all the big boys in it, so Maggoth Lords and stuff, as well as the Glockkin. Let's like play without some of my usual crutches, like Lord of Afflictions with a split horn helm. So I had that was out of the list, and I played it and won that event. Then I was like, all right, well, this works really well. I'll take it down to Melbourne. Took it to Melbourne, did really well at that event. I was like, well, there's no point. There's some tweaks I'll make to this list, but it's doing me really, really well. I'm able to sort of secure games. Ironically, I was like, oh, I'm able to secure games really quickly with this list and lock them down and play that out. Did not translate to quick games once we got to the world stage, though. But yeah, so took Nurgle and was really happy with the list and how I performed and how it performed over the course of the event.
Cool. So we've got a Sylvaneth, and we've got a Nurgle going into the meta, and I'm sure I'll hear very shortly about like your preparation. But maybe a few call outs as well is that the first off, you've all mentioned that the tickets aren't funded by Games Workshop. So if you plan to attend and you win the event, either your tournament organizer is going to pay for your trip, they might contribute a certain amount of money, or it's at your expense. So partially probably why some players weren't able to make it. They dropped out. Obviously, it is expensive, especially for us, right? It would have cost us what, $4,000-$5,000 Australian if we want, maybe more. Yeah,
easily more.
Yeah. And Tom mentioned the late notice, and that was because so the golden tickets really came up kind of January, which is where Henry CanCon performance secured something really early, and the Oceanic Championships, which is unique to Australia, which is what Tom came second in, that ended late October, early November. So realistically, the later your event is, the more you've got to scramble, and I guess maybe the importance of funding, right? Telling someone in January they've got almost 12 months to save up to go to America is very different to, hey, $5,000, go book some leave. You've got less than a month to do it. So something to consider if you are planning on applying for a golden ticket, which Games Workshop is reopening. Both you can apply for a golden ticket, or you can try to get it again. So Sydney GT, which is my tournament, I have just resecured my golden ticket. So 2024, I will still be offering a golden ticket. And from my side of the fence as a tournament organizer, I had actually contributed about half of the price. So I think I put $1,500 towards the winner's ticket. So can't fully fund it. My tournaments are not that profitable. I'm not ready to pay you $5,000 just yet, but hopefully kind of help you get there. So, but great event. Other things I might want to call out before I find a little bit more about your preparation is, so when you get to the tournament, it was obviously country orientated as well. There were 8 games at minimum. So everyone was going to play 8 games, not 5, 8, and some as much as 12, which is what our ultimate winner, Nicholas and Tom Worsley done. That was 12. No, not even Tom. Tom only did 11 games. Nick and Ronya did the shadow round, which made it a 12 game for old Nicholas. 12 games in 4 days, including four games in 1 day, is absolutely bonkers.
It certainly is, and made for some very long days.
Yeah.
You're telling me, as a TO, I'm very aware.
Yeah.
So like, how do you practice and prepare for something like this? So you've got 8 games. They said that we would go. You didn't know the battle plans until list submission, and even then, I think you kind of knew you were going to play mostly all of them, which for some GTs, they don't pick all the missions, and there's a select 5 to 7 that they always run. So there was going to be some questionable battle plans coming in, and probably none more questionable as the one that happened in the knockout final between Nick and Ronya. That was definitely an interesting battle plan to be picked. But how do you prepare for this marathon event, Henry?
So I've previously I've played War Machine to quite a high level, and so I kind of have a bit of a system down for how I like to improve. I don't know if this works for everyone, but what I did was I locked in my list fairly early, kind of just in me. List sub wasn't that early, and we didn't get a players pack until quite late. But I kind of decided that this was the list that I was going to take. I painted it quite well. I was relatively practiced with it, so that's when I kind of switched into, let's get this as best as possible. So what I do is I focus on just the little things. So like my list was Sylvaneth. I had Drycha. Over the course of, I went to a 2-day tournament. I believe it was GoldCon up here in Queensland. My whole focus for that tournament was just Drycha's positioning. So I ended up going 3-2 at that event. I knew I didn't have much of a game into KO and got the 2 KO players on the second day. But my whole focus for that event was just focusing on Drycha, and she always had to be in the right position. She always had to be shooting the right thing. She always had to be striking and fading at the correct times and kind of working on that. And then at the end of that weekend, I kind of went, cool, okay, that's her sorted. Switch to the next thing. So the next one is the Archer's positioning, or it's the Kurnoth Hunters, or it's the strike and fading, or it's focusing on something else. But it's purely focusing on one small thing until that becomes kind of a gut feeling, a kind of an unconscious decision. I'm a big believer when it comes to these games that 99% of the time, if you've got kind of a gut feeling to do something, there's a reason. You're not 100% sure of it. They might have a rule that you've forgotten about, but getting it to that unconscious, that reflexive, like, oh yeah, I can deal with that. This unit can kill that unit. You don't need to sit there and crunch all the numbers. You just kind of know. And so working on the little parts of the list to get to that stage, that's how I kind of work on my own list and work to get better. So
you've had deliberate practice. You understand what things can and can't kind of do. You have done absolute deliberate practice, so it's muscle memory. So when you get to a bigger tournament, you don't have to worry about getting your measurements out and like really super like trying to worry about things. You are very much just in the flow of the game. You've got enough muscle memory to just get into it and do the thing.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that.
One of the perfect examples of it was I often used Drycha as a strike and fade piece, so she'd charge out and then fade back after fighting. Putting her and setting her up in a position where I am fully cover my main bunker with her Unleash Hell. Towards the start, it was basically I'd get out all my 6-inch gauges and measure it out. Yep, no, I've got this all covered. Towards the end, I could just eyeball and go, yep, this is how I need to position my units here, here, and here. This is the size of her gap. This is how far 6 inches is. And because you've been doing it so long and so often, it becomes that unconscious, that reflex to go, cool, she strikes and fades to there. And then I'm covered. I don't have to kind of consciously think. I can be focused on what's my next battle tactic, what's their next battle tactic, where are they going to go, what are they going to do.
I love that. Tom, what about yourself?
Bit of a different process to Henry, and probably not one that I would endorse for anybody who's looking to travel 24 hours for a tournament. Which is that due to the nature of my job, and I work in education and the time of year that it was, very much the lead into sort of our crunch time as far as getting seniors ready for their final exams and all that sort of jazz, and I lead a faculty and all that, which means that I have virtually zero spare time sort of in the final quarter of the year. So my preparation was play events that I could. So I played Sydney GT and I was like, cool, I did well in that. A week later, I had a one-dayer, which was great, and just tested out Seraphon played my first 3 games of Seraphon ever at that, and was like, awesome. Won't be taking them to the Worlds. And then a few weeks after that was the Sydney event. A week after that was the Melbourne event, and then 3 weeks after that I was in Atlanta. And as bad as it is to say, that was all my game experience, all my game practice in the 2 months leading up to Worlds. With one exception, which was a very intense and very enjoyable game with Henry, using whatever we could for terrain the night before. In a bit of what we now affectionately call, and should be adopted wherever it can be, street hammer. Just the nature of it was I felt very across my lists, and I fortunately I get to play against a lot of different stuff when I do play. So decisions as far as what went into lists, I was pretty confident with. The Glockin is such an amazing control piece, and that's what I started playing the game with. My very first list was play Glockin, quote Tom Guan. So the mechanics were fine. I was fine with it, and fortunately, it's a reactive list a lot of the time. So it's about not giving anything away, and then being ready to react and negate your opponent's plans at the right times, which was really good for that sort of prep space and analyzing opponents' matchups. So, if it's a melee list, this is sort of what I'm going into. If it's a sort of magic control list, I didn't get that one quite as right as I wish I had. And then if it's a shooting list, this is sort of what I'm going into. So a lot of mine was more chatting with guys like Mitch and Joel, and ahead of the event, the 2 of the other guys that came with us, and adopting our old WTC prep for War Machine days, which is figure out who's in your pool and do a little bit of a grid matrix of like, this is roughly what that matchup should be like, and these might be the sorts of things that I need to do. So I felt like well prepared, but not particularly on the tabletop itself. It was more academic than that.
But you've had a long background with Nurgle as well, right? You've dabbled in Slaves, you've dabbled in Seraphon, but you've mostly been a Nurgle player since your time. So it, again, probably goes back to the muscle memory that Henry was talking about, where it's just adapting to the meta, finding something. And you're right, traveling across the world, something like Flies, which is something you've done incredibly well with. Transporting some models, bringing in Archaon can be very difficult. There are certain models where they don't fly very well. So adapting a list that can travel across the world can be equally as important.
Yeah, that was a determining factor for me. I would have loved to have taken Flies, but with the way Flies are impossible to store in foam. And I didn't have the time or the money to get I've got a battle foam bag, and they sell cutouts with some Flies on foam slots, but wasn't going to be practical. And either way, that would have had to have been stowed. So I traveled with a magnetic case, and the parameters of what I could take, I couldn't possibly have fit a functional list into that if it was fly heavy. So fortunately, Glockin list had one sort of big shelf and then 2 very little shelves of stuff. So it all fit sort of tessellated just perfectly. But you're completely right. And I was a little bit sad that I couldn't take Flies, because that would have been fun.
I had a similar experience with, I built my Sylvaneth list to fit in a case. I transported trees across the world. They were very much Tetrised in, but the core, one of the first kind of tenets that I put together when kind of figuring out what I'd take was, does it fit in a single case, or do I have to kind of get multiple cases? And my wife traveled with me, and was I going to kind of repossess her carry-on luggage as well to take more models or not. So
that would have been clever. I should
That-
take my spouse next time, and she's going to be really happy when I say that you're going to come so that I can use you for carry-on.
Yep.
I think it's a fair compromise, but it's interesting, right? Because I am thinking about my LVO list. I'm practicing for LVO, and I've had to literally put 2 of my Mega Gargants upside down. So I've got 2 Spider-Man Mega Gargants and 2 on the base, because I do not want to put it in carrier in like checked luggage. You always see it breaks, and you want to be in control, and like it'll determine like what you can and can't take. And faction terrain, Sylvaneth, that's challenging as well. So something to consider, especially if you're traveling abroad. So you've talked to me a little bit about your preparation and some practice and the events and things like that. But what were you actually expecting at the World Championship, right? You've got high caliber players, you've got certain armies that were doing really well in the meta. Did you think the likes of Khorne and OBR and Zombie Spam and, insert the top lists and the top armies of the day? But what were you actually expecting going in? Or did you think there was going to be a bunch of crazy people with off-meta lists trying to like catch you out with some craziness with, I don't know, something? Henry, is anything that you were expecting?
I kind of expected both. Like there's strong lists, there's strong armies at whatever time that you're playing. They will be there. They're strong for a reason. These are some of the best players in the world. They will be playing the best armies that they can play. But also I was 100% expecting there to be a few absolutely left field. Like no one's ever seen this list before. Because if any player can get them to work, it would be a player that has gone to there. So that's what I kind of expected from the players. For the event itself, like I expected it to be an absolutely top quality event. Like G-Dub is officially now one of the largest industries in the UK. I think they recently their profits were greater than the entire UK fishing industry.
Yeah.
I believe it was recently. So like they've got the money, they've got the backing. They know that if they do this well, it can really be like the big event for all Warhammer players. So I expected them to really be putting their best foot forward and to like really be kind of flexing with what they are capable of. And parts of the tournament, 100% that was true. Parts of the tournament, I was absolutely blown away. No other kind of people or companies or anything like that would even come close to what they put forward. So,
you want to give me some examples of maybe some things that kind of caught you by surprise pleasantly, or?
So like the fact that they had 3 different streaming kind of groups. They had a French channel, a Spanish channel, and an English channel as well. Like that's just crazy. Like even massive events, you usually get a streamer. You don't get 3 in 3 different languages. That's absolutely insane. And it speaks a lot to kind of how they know the market. Like they must have huge, like I know the French are fantastic wargamers, but to have Spanish as well, like there's a huge portion of the world is Spanish speaking. So they're definitely looking to tap into that market more. The fact that they had all the exclusive merch at the store, and they had all of the kind of the halls where we were themed really well. That's something that I know a lot of other tournaments struggle with. I know I've especially struggled with that running tournaments. But to get the right atmosphere, that it's not just, hey, we're pushing models around in a random convention hall, but it's no, this is a premier event that you're at. Like we got a couple of photos in front of the life-size Terminator statue. And for anyone who hasn't played 40K, it's like 2 meters, 3 meters tall. Like when we say life-size, we're tiny compared to it. But just the sense of scale and the sense of organization. Like I've run big events. You've run big events as well, Coach. Often it's just you or maybe 1 or 2 other people helping you behind the scenes. They had teams of people. Like there was, I think, 5 AOS judges. You were one of them.
Yeah, myself, Matt, Gareth, Tom, James. Yeah, I think that was all of us. We had 5, and we had people who were active judging. We had people watching tables, especially stream games. And one of the things that we got told, which I'm actually really excited about, was we got told to actively judge. So if we walked past a table and we saw something or we suspected something, we had the power to interrupt the game and judge accordingly. We didn't have to just sit there and wait for someone to call us over, which people did. People did call us over, and a lot of the time is a lot of like grey and a lot of like, how does the interaction work? But for the vast majority, like we just walk around, and if we saw someone roll a dice and it was they were just in the moment, like we could interrupt, but we didn't have to very often.
Yeah. I got questioned at one point. I had a couple of dead models off to the side, and I think it was Tom was walking past and he's like, "Those guys are out of coherency." And it's like, no, they're dead. He's like, "Okay, cool." But that's something that like you don't have at most events. So, but just having kind of the teams and the amount of people helping out was amazing. So like it's really it pushed it up into the next level type of event. So.
Oh, awesome. And Tom, what yourself? What were you expecting? And whether it's the people and the armies, whether it is the actual event itself or the experience, like what were you expecting flying halfway around the world for a tournament?
I had no idea what to expect, to be perfectly honest. I was going in with the mantra of like, don't lose all your games. And as far as the quality of play, I was expecting, and rightly so, like it was going to be tough. Every game was like the final game of the tournament if you're on the top table. So that was what I was expecting. List wise, I wouldn't, we've got media that covers events each week, and you can kind of keep tabs of like roughly who's playing what. So I was like, there were some things that I was anticipating, like I was expecting a lot of OBR. Probably wasn't expecting as much Seraphon as we end up being there, but awesome. And I learned a lot about Seraphon over the weekend. Certainly wasn't expecting majority, like, one of the largest shared factions to be Skaven. That caught me out by surprise, and I was like, awesome. And got to play against one of these really cool Skaven lists in the first round, and it was a cool game. Like, I've got a buddy who plays them, when I do get casual games in, who plays them. I'm such a big fan of that faction, but you don't get to play them a lot at events. So that was really cool.
Yeah, good call. So there was every faction represented, except there was no Daughters of Cain, no Cities of Sigmar, because it was old book. You couldn't use new cities. Technically Fire Slayers, but one of the Georgia Warband stepped up, Kevin, stepped up as a ringer, and he actually played the full tournament. So he was top Fire Slayer and brought Fire Slayers to the fold. No Slanesh, which was interesting to me. I thought there'd be at least one pretenders list. And Skaven was the second highest chaos faction other than Khorne, which was very surprising. We saw Tom Morsley go to the semi-finals. Richie had the same list. There was 6 Skaven lists out of 90, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and who'd have thought? Like, was my only reaction. Like, who'd have thought that you'd see that much Skaven, which was awesome.
That was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. But the event was, like Henry said, was immaculately presented. The judges that were brought over were great. Like, working with a number of them on a few different game scenarios. Couldn't have asked for better people who were, looking over those sort of situations. It's good to have Matt there, who, if you have a rules question, the guy who writes the rules for the game is probably the right person to have at an event. Everything about the event was really, really excellently presented, like at a professional level. We go to CanCon down in Canberra every year. I've had my hand at running War Machine for CanCon before, and it's a big event. But as far as like polish, that this was something that was a really cool top level that I've never necessarily interacted with before, and so I'm like gold standard from there on out. I'm just saying Sydney GT. Some of these Terminator size statues and. The gauntlet's been thrown.
Well, geez, don't threaten me with a good time. Do not threaten me with something going bigger and better. I was going to ask you a question. Now you throw me off.
Yeah, I've just been a smart ass and thrown you off. Sorry, mate.
Oh, no. You mentioned Matt. Matt Rose, who you may or may not know from Meta Watch. He was one of the head writers, or he is one of the people in charge of Age of Sigmar. without giving too much away. But more importantly, he was there actually not only contributing to the tournament staff, but also talking to players like you, getting feedback, asking about, good interactions, bad interactions, units that might need to get a little boost, and units that he thinks, and just getting a lot of verbatim from the players, which I thought was really interesting and unique to get somebody come from Games Workshop obtaining real-time feedback other than just looking at stats and what might be happening in Games Workshop HQ. So more community kind of interaction and listening and conversations, the better health the game's going to be in. So, kudos to Matt and everyone who traveled over from Nottingham to hear us. And I'm sure a lot of people gave him advice, maybe some bum steer advice, like, "Oh, OBR's okay. Like, don't touch them anymore."
No, Myriad, what even, No, and I was actually really thankful I got to be one of those people. And I had a pretty robust conversation with him about some of the, my thoughts on, where things are at and things that could be not like here's my wish list of things you need to change, but just like questioning in terms of where, what sort of ways are you thinking about the game? Because we're seeing points drops, so the game gets bigger as a result. Is that an intentional? How are you reining that in? Because it does mean games go longer, the battlefield gets smaller, that sort of thing. It was really good to interact with him on that level. He was a very, very affable, wonderful person to talk to on that front.
Yeah, great guy. What about the previews? There's something that maybe people aren't aware of is that Games Workshop do the preview, the model preview, before it actually happens online. So if people have watched it on Twitch, or they've seen the Warhammer community blog kind of coming out with, here's the cool model, here's the new thing. We at the events actually get to see it about an hour or so before it goes live. Did either of you get to attend the preview, and what was it like for you experiencing in real time, if you did?
Unfortunately, we kind of had other plans, so I don't think any of us actually attended the preview. Unfortunately, as well, one of the kind of sad things about the event was there was a bit of a stomach bug going around. So I think most of the Australians that went over got hit at one point, and a few of us were hit on that night, unfortunately. So unfortunately, I don't think any of us attended it.
Yeah, I was ticking off a bucket list going to the NBA that night, so I decided to get sick the night after. But yeah,
was the previews on Friday or the Wednesday? Because we did basketball on the Wednesday, the Knicks game, the Hawks and Knicks.
I went to 2 games.
Yeah, you went to the Friday game as well. Must have happened around the same time.
Yeah. It was the same, because we got out of the game, and Mitch and Christian and Joel, who were with us, both huge FEC players from way back when. We got out of the game, and our phones went off with people like, "Have you seen Usher?" And we're like, and they were just like, it was a 20-minute walk back to the hotel, and we're getting some pretty big fanboy reactions out of that. So the hype was real. We just weren't there for the hype.
But it is a fantastic thing that they do to kind of
absolutely
really establish it as kind of a flagship premiere. Like, this is the best event you're going to go to. Here's some exclusive stuff that you will see later, but you guys get to know first. So that's just another one of the kind of the bonuses of going there.
Speaking of the basketball, what did you do outside of the competition in Atlanta? Did you guys get to eat anywhere? Is anything like? I assume you weren't just in the hotel doing Warhammer 24/7. Henry?
So we went to the aquarium on kind of the first day. We figured after almost a full solid 24 hours of traveling, going and just kind of zoning out in front of kind of the fish and the ocean exhibits would be a good idea. And it was 100% absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend anyone, if you've got a day to kill in Georgia, in Atlanta, go to the aquarium. We saw whale sharks, beluga whales, dolphins, manta rays. It was absolutely awesome. And then we kind of switched into, okay, we're here for Warhammer. Let's play Warhammer. So we ended up going out most nights with a lot of the other Australian AOS players. Like I said, I was over there with my wife, so we went off and kind of took her shopping as well. That was part of. She comes over and helps me, supports me, brings me drinks throughout the tournament, but I owe her a day of shopping. And then on the last day, we did the Coke Museum as well. With Tom was there with us as well while we were waiting for kind of our flights to leave. But it was really interesting as well, and we both kind of definitely got on a bit of a sugar high towards the end, where they let you taste all the different samples from around the world. So,
yeah.
How's their Coke compared to ours?
I think it was was it Taiwan's or Thailand's?
Both.
Both.
Thailand's Fanta.
Yeah.
Taiwan's Sprite. Awesome.
Yeah. And then there was one, I think it was it Morocco's citrus? There was one that we all tasted and were just like, no, we're never going there. Something completely random, but you now know if you go to Thailand, their Fanta is delicious. If you go to, I think it was it India? Or I couldn't tell you. It was some plum flavored thing with a very bad aftertaste.
Yeah, it tasted like cough syrup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What yourself, Tom? Anything you got outside of playing Warhammer?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to go all the way across the world and not, do some stuff in the city that we were in. So, first day, similar thoughts to Henry. We went to the aquarium, which was, like you said, incredible. It's apparently like one of the best in the entire world, and that was really, really cool. The second day, we went out for an authentic Georgian barbecue lunch that day, which was great. I got a heap of brisket, which made me a happy boy. And then the second day, I took myself to the Civil Rights Museum, which was something that I try and make sure I do is always go and, if I'm in a city, always learn some local history, and it seemed like a pretty important part of Atlanta's history. But outside of that, and then did the Coke Museum, which was sort of on the tail end of me being the sickest I've ever been in my life. I think I lost like 6 kilos while I was away. It was savage. So a bit of soft drink was good for the old tum before I got onto a plane. But outside of that, we went to a couple of NBA games, which was a big thing for me. I'm a huge sports fan, a huge NBA fan. Unfortunately, didn't get to see my team, and I'm a little bit jealous of Mitch and Christian, who did then power on to Boston and got to see a Celtics game. But we got to see a couple of, and some really cool some players of the generation, in fine form. So that was pretty special for me. And outside of that, just dinners and pubs and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, some of the highlights I had was I went out for barbecue. There's a credible place called Fox Bros, which my first day got completely messed up. So the story is I landed in Atlanta just before midnight. Turns out my hotel had the wrong booking and I couldn't get into my room until 4 a.m. So my whole plan for the day before got completely ruined because I slept from 4 a.m. till 4 p.m. Quickly went out, got barbecue, came back, went to bed. The following day was setting up the whole tournament. So I got to set up the Space Marine, set up all the tables, set up the grand narrative, obviously with other people helping, but like just the all setup. So you asked me like, what was I expecting? I was expecting to do a couple of gym sessions and I did 0 because I was just 6 in the morning till almost midnight every day. What else did I do? Went out to a really cool tiki bar with a whole bunch of people from Games Workshop. The NBA, basically getting courtside seats on the NBA, which was incredible, with Noah Singh, Matt from GW, as well as Tom Meggans. So that was a really cool experience. The only I've been to the baseball. I've been to the NFL. I hadn't been to the NBA yet, so it was nice to kind of tick that one off for myself. And then, I think just kept it cruisy with most of you all, just hanging out and chatting. And the days were long. They were really long. And it's not because they were playing Warhammer. A lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people were staying at the hotel. So people just hung around and got dinner and got drinks and super social and super casual, and just people doing pickup games even after the event was over. Like people were just playing games and just hanging out, and it was just really cool social interaction. Yeah,
it was good. The vibe was pretty good, and the hotel being where the actual convention was super convenient for us.
What about the actual tournament? Any highlights from the games that you played, or whether it was a faction, whether it was a moment, whether it was something that you were losing and you swung back? Like, how Henry, anything that you'd add to your highlights?
I really enjoyed all my games. I really focused on making sure that both players had an enjoyable experience, because I know how bad it can be if you don't. It did take a little while for some of the players to warm up to my particular brand of humor. I've got a very dry and sarcastic humor. Most of my jokes were around insulting Dreicher. I found that the more I insult her and belittle her, the better she performs. It's the complete opposite for the Kurnoth Hunters. They need all the love and support they can get. But once they did warm up to me, we had great games. But like one of the games I played against Everest, the French player, we had an amazing game. We ended that game in a draw. And at the end as well, after we packed up and we had a chat and we were just sitting there absolutely exhausted. When I was dropping my models back up to the room, my wife, who watched most of that game, she said it was like watching both of you were playing a mirror. You both you did the same things. You were thinking the same thing. You could see the cogs both working for us at the same time. And one of us would have I'll do this, but the other one would only be half a second behind them. So she said that was a fantastic game to watch, and that was an amazing game to play. And then another player, Ricky, who I actually, due to the way that the tournament was structured, I actually got to play him twice.
Is that Gits Ricky?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Once in the pool play and then again in the world bracket. Our second game, because we'd already built that bit of a repertoire with each other, we had a great time. And one of the judges, James, came over and he was looking all concerned, and we were just hanging out and just having a great game. He's like, "Are you guys going okay? What's happening here?" And we're like, No. We're having a great time. Well, what's the issue? And it's you've been playing for 4.5 hours. You need to start wrapping this up. And we're like, oh, we hadn't even realized that we'd gone on for so long. We were just having an amazing game. And that one also ended in a tie due to it. And absolutely just me pulling it out from behind in a massive play that had a 2% chance to work or something. We ended up figuring out at the end. So, but just the games, they were the highlights of the tournament, and just the quality of player that I played against. Everyone was a great player. You expected everyone to be a good top level player, but just with how they approached the game, everyone wanted a clean, precise, open game where you're not trying to get the little, oh, gotcha, you forgot to do that, or oh, you didn't do that, or it was just a good, solid example of what top level players can do. And I learnt so much across the tournament. So I haven't actually played a game of AOS since then. I played Lord of the Rings, 40k, and Mordheim. Even that's dating me a bit. But I'm keen to play another game of AOS now with that experience to see how my perspectives of the game have changed.
Who's your Mordheim gang?
I'm currently playing Sisters of Sigmar. So
yes. You and me, brother. You and me.
Haven't ever done them before, so keen to get them on the table.
Yeah, I've got all of them, including, is it Bertha, the special hero? I love the Sisters. I just wish, it was my one wish for Cities of Sigmar. I'm give me back my Sisters of Sigmar, my nuns. I love the sculpts so much.
Yeah, no, they are so nice. I've unfortunately got 3D printed ones. I saw a new in-box set come up for about $500. I'm like, I can't really justify almost $100 a model for old schools.
Mine are the originals, so yeah, I would pay. I wouldn't pay $500 either, to be honest. But I was lucky enough to keep my old humans, as well as my witch hunters, as well as I've got all the old flagellants and all the witch hunters. And actually, I think I am in one of my boxes. I have the Carnival of Chaos.
The best one.
Yeah, no, the wagon, the noble wagon,
the play cart.
Pretty sure I've got that as well.
Band.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of that. When do you go to work and leave your house unattended? So.
Rarely. Before I go to Tom, I do want to call out, and I want to find out for you. You can't just tell me I learnt so much and then move along. What was the thing you learnt the most? If you were pass it on to the world.
Well, if I had to boil it down to just one tip, it's keep in mind of what your objective is in the overall game, but also in each turn. And that is very much assess what you need to do to have to win the game, which is majority of the time is score max points every turn, and set yourself up to deny your opponent. But the primary thing is the easiest way to win is to score max points every turn, because then if your opponent makes one mistake or has one unlucky dice roll, they don't score max points and then you win. So it's very much keeping in mind with what you actually need to do, and don't overextend, don't get greedy, score your points, preserve your resources, and that's it. In one of my games against, I played Matt from Wales with his Nighthaunt, and I have a very bad game into Nighthaunt. I have a lot of sides. Their rend is very pointless. And so I had to, because of just a kind of a bad matchup, I had to go for a more risky play quite early in the game. Unfortunately, that risky play got me the attrition lead, but it also meant that I failed a battle tactic. Now, at the time, I made the call kind of internally that if I can get the attrition lead, it's worth it to fail that battle tactic. Because if I didn't wipe the unit that I was charging into, I would have achieved the battle tactic. That was the only battle tactic that I dropped over the entire weekend, which I'm very happy with how I achieved that. But it often meant that sometimes I didn't have the greatest battle tactics available, so I had to not always score the max on objectives. So quite often around the mid-game, I dropped a point or two behind my opponent, and then they could then just kind of play solidly for the rest of the game. They didn't have to go for those risky long shot plays. So it's very much kind of taking away from that the primary way you win games is you score points. So scoring points is your top priority, even if it might be a better attrition play or it might be a better position in late game. Keeping that pressure on your opponents that you have to play a perfect turn to keep up is very much kind of a big thing that I'll be taking into future games.
Awesome. And for the people who are listening, and I want you to underline, bullet point, use a highlighter. At no point did Henry say kill the thing. It's about scoring points. It's about, like, do not build your lists about just killing. Sure, you've got to do some killing, but it's about scoring 1, 2 more, your battle tactics, what your battle tactic sequence is, reducing the risk in order to score these things. These are important, folks, not just how do I kill my opponent and remove their toys by battle round 3. So just mental note. Tom, what yourself?
Highlights from games. I had some of the best games of Warhammer I've ever played in my life, as far as like the interactions were concerned. I played pretty well over the course of the event, and finished pretty well. But there are a few people like that I would absolutely love to shout out, which was my opponents, Frank, Fred, Christoph, and Tom, who just gave me some of the most positive interactions that, and qualities of game that I've ever had in my life. From a collaborative standpoint, in terms of those games were very much like a, all right, like you say you want to achieve this, like we're going to be working together to achieve this sort of games. But also just, in hindsight, I probably should have done a few more practice games heading towards the Worlds. And so there were a couple of matchups where I didn't quite understand absolutely, or I didn't have every rule committed to memory. And Seraphon's a really good example of that. So Frank, who was my round 2 opponent, was just the epitome of patience with me, just being like, oh, how does because also French to English, there was he's not that he couldn't speak English extremely well, but I was caught off unawares by a couple of rules, and not because it was got triggering me. I'm like, oh, how does that work? So just constantly being like, oh, how does that work, sort of thing. And him just being having the patience of an absolute saint and running me through everything really conscientiously and really amicably and all that sort of stuff. And he beat the pants off me. But it was just such a really, really wonderful sort of game. And I had that sort of that consistency of let's work together, let's have a chill game from those. As far as things that I learned along the way, I definitely learned not to fight a Mortis Guard. I think that is just don't ever. they're not worth it. So I had one game where they just broke, like, that's just a unit that breaks my entire faction's back. But it was a really good example of, like, just don't. Yeah, I was ahead in the game and just got a little bit cute with, like, this is my opportunity. This is my one opportunity to really go in and capitalize on that unit. I didn't capitalize on that unit at all, and sort of got a little bit of a tunnel vision for them rather than focusing on the scenario, focusing on that path to victory, which I could have much better secured than I did. Time management, as far as, like, just having an awareness of where games are up to. I think, me personally, I'll probably be taking a clock with me to every event that I go to from now on, because unfortunately I had quite a few games go to round time, having to do my least favorite thing in the world, which is trying to talk out an entire game through the last couple of turns. And the interactions that came off that weren't the best. So, like, I won't go into that any deeper than that, but it was just like unfortunately, it can become a little bit of a situation of who can plead their case with a stronger personality scenario rather than in anything else. And I didn't care about, like, winning or losing the game, but it creates a moment where, like, we go from having really chill, lovely, easy going game to, oh no, now we need to figure out who wins, and because that's happening, it matters. And things can turn very quickly as far as the way that interaction goes. So that was a big learning for me. Is that I'm going to be playing lists. Like, I took a list that was designed to grind for 5 turns, and I'm probably going to shy away from that for the next little while. But also that I think, for me personally, even if an event wants me to or not, I'll be using a clock, at least for my side of the table, because that was a bit disappointing.
All right, so the perfect segue, literally where I was going next.
Yes.
My segue is, was there things that you would like to see different in the next year? So a couple of probably things that were different to traditional GTs that people would go to. It was 8 rounds, so you played 5 games, 2 games on day 1, 3 games on day 2. Then there was a top 2 from each of the groups that went on to play a couple of other games. The games went for 4 hours essentially. So there was 3 hours of game time, except for day 1 where there was 4 hours. There was a lunch break, or there was a break of an hour in between every game. Now, Tom's alluding to something that was contentious, and that is no chess clocks were, I don't want to say the word allowed, because they were allowed. TOs were not going to tell you to take away your tabletop accessory or ornament, but we were not enforcing, nor if someone's time ran out as a chess clock, we would not force hard dice down. So there was a really interesting, to Tom's point, it got to 3-hour mark, or even 3.5 hours. Because these games are very high level, there's a lot on stake. There's a lot of, like Henry talked about, a very chess kind of you go, I go, very, strategic interactions. Some of these games took a while. And for some of the games, like on day 4 and day 3 and day 4, I think I counted one game went for 5 hours when, it was their last game. What else was different? So that was that kind of thing. I think that was kind of it, right? Like what would you? I'm just trying to think of, like, what was different versus traditional GT. So I guess maybe the question here is, what would you do different? Whether it was rules, formats, restrictions, tabletop accessories. Tom, you're in flow. I'll let you continue, and then I'll pass it to Henry.
Yeah, no worries, man. Look, there's 2 things, and one for me is a preference thing, and the other one is a structural thing, which I'll talk about first, which is the timing and time management of rounds. So days were incredibly long, and even day 1, which was only 2 games, though, I absolutely appreciate the TOs, and you guys did a fabulous job of managing the event, and calls wise, there's no contention around calls that were made by TOs. But the intention was very clearly laid out. We're not using clocks. We're not putting a round timer up visibly for you guys, because G-Dubs, in their infinite wisdom, has decided that this is how long you got for a game, and games should be able to resolve themselves to completion. So you're not using a clock because that might prevent that. That I like in a bit of criticism of that philosophy. I think that worked completely against their intention. And the amount of games where judges were coming around saying, no, game stopping and talk it out, rather than the idea of like, if a clock has an enforceable rule that all the players pack could have had a clause around, if a game is continuing at the point where the round timer is finished, this is how you resolve the game. Like finish the scoring at the end of that round. You either do or you don't score grand strategies, that sort of conversation. Really, like that needs to be clear for that level of play. So that was really, and like I said, like and nothing on the TOs, but the idea was that the game should resolve, and I wouldn't constitute a scenario where a TO did come over at, like, I had one game where TO did come over and was like, oh no, we actually need to wrap this up and you need to talk it out. That to me is completely antithetical to the process they were trying to have there. And I think that came from a structural problem, which was that day one was a 4-hour game. And then day 3, 2, 3, 4 were 3-hour games. And what that meant was that, like, I know for me personally, that I became acclimatized to a 4-hour game very quickly. Like I was like, okay, like roughly, like, I haven't played, in a week or so. This is the pace of games. They're telling us when we should be up to in rounds, as far as the game's progressing. Okay, I'm kind of, like, my brain's sort of getting into that rhythm. It means that the social interactions that I'm able to engage at the table are able to happen at a certain pace. So this is the sort of tempo and the timber that we're able to work through. And then day 2 rolls around, and that went out the window, like in game 1. And that was really hard to then pull back from, as far as like, how do I then manage my time, without resorting to a clock and without having an actual countdown on the wall, for example, would have just been that thing that helps. But I think that was a really, in my opinion, like a really weird way to approach it. Was like even just like day 1 could have been 2 games that were 3 hours, but the differences in round lengths was a really, really weird thing to work around as a player. The other side of it, which and I'm not too concerned with a ladder, or a final table in all senses, but was just the scoring metric being a strength of schedule system rather than Age of Sigmar, compared to and Henry and I both have known each other for quite a while playing War Machine, which was a strength of schedule system. And the reason why it was a strength of schedule system is that the scoring system for it was not granular enough to determine tie breaks based on game outcome. It was sort of it was a weird counting. Like, you'd have to get into weird counting, which was just annoying to do.
There was 3 different conditions as well, so
absolutely
didn't work.
It didn't work at all. Whereas Age of Sigmar, and this is a total credit, and one of the things I love about Age of Sigmar, which is the GHB and the scenario system in terms of a granularity between objective points, tactics, and grand strategies, as 3 modular and granular scoring systems within the game, allow you to do a score creation system natively without creating too many issues surrounding ties and things like that. And you can resolve ties pretty easily based on the granular elements of that. So I thought, though, that's for me is a preference thing, and whatever, it wouldn't stop me from going back to Worlds, but I just thought it was it's weird that you guys have got a game system that has a granular ladder building system and didn't use that. So those are probably the 2 things that I would change.
And just for anyone who doesn't quite understand what Tom's talking about, most tournaments would say win-loss would be your first scoring mechanism. Then you often see something like battle tactics, whether it is, how many battle tactics did you score? Some tournaments will do how many did you deny of your opponents? Then it would be, did you score your grand strategy or not? And then maybe fourth kind of scoring piece is strength of schedule. So, So Games Workshop, in this particular event, we had strength of schedule as the secondary one. So first was just win-loss, then it was strength of schedule, which pros and cons, but
it worked out as strength of schedule first and then wins losses second. So if you go back and have a look at the ladder, there are people with 3 wins, 5 losses over 4 win individuals. So like I said, it led to a very unusual way of scoring a tournament.
I would agree with you on that. Actually, before I even agree or disagree, Henry, what do you feel about what Tom said? Did you feel the same thing, or do you have different?
100%. I definitely kind of agree with everything that Tom has mentioned. according to the scoring system, I came either 66th, 69th, or 84th, depending on if you check the app, the website, or the widget. So whether there's even an issue there, and like that's not to say that they didn't put on a great event. It was their first time. So like I do want to preface that any of the other kind of complaints, if you can call them that, or critiques, is very much it's the first time they've run this, and there's obviously going to be teething issues. But yeah, I 100% agree with Tom. Like I said, I played one game for 4.5 hours, but we weren't rushed to finish. I think we ended up playing another 45 minutes. We were very much in the world's bracket, which was kind of the people who weren't in contention for the top spot at this point. But why should we be allowed to play an extra hour and a half over someone else? And just little inconsistencies like that. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to it was the first time. So there's going to be a lot of learnings.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Just because some people are going to be thinking, wait a minute, Games Workshop is their first event. They've obviously run a lot of events, both in Nottingham and obviously the GW Open Series, which has happened for 2 years in a row, 3 or 4 events a year. So it's not that they're first events, but this particular format with the 4 quadrants and the teams interactions, that was the first. And
a lot of new things to apply in addition to running a successful tournament and providing good judges and everything like that. So I definitely don't want anyone to think it was not a great event. 100% it was amazing. I would 100% be going back. But yeah, it's from someone who has run events before, very much teething issues. I would be very surprised if anything like that happened at the next one. One of my kind of biggest issues that I had with the event was the players pack. Like we've touched on earlier, I was in an opposite situation to Tom. I had tons of time to prepare, but I only got the players pack. We only got the players pack about a month out, which had the scoring matrix, which was a very different scoring matrix to the list that I had written for. That's on me. I was trying to second guess what it could be, but by not kind of only releasing a players pack for your World Championships, your big flagship event, a month out, I think is probably a little bit not great, especially because most of the people who went probably had some inkling to, hey, I'm a player of a certain skill level. There's a decent chance that I might get an opportunity to go to this. And even just good competitive players in general would likely read what the players pack was to see for I know I read any players pack that I can get my hands on to just see what other TOs are doing, to see what kind of, hey, I actually think it was yours, coach. Last year you had some particular wording in a paragraph, and I was just like, ooh, that's really good. I'm stealing that. And so I just copied and pasted into kind of my working players pack for my next event. But yeah, releasing that a lot earlier would have been a lot very useful from my perspective. And this might be a bit of a dicey opinion, but adding a sports component. So the big 3 aspects of tabletop wargaming from my perspective are your generalship, your skills on the table, your painting, the quality of your models, and your sportsmanship, your how you approach the game. Because when it comes down to it, it is a game between 2 people. If one person doesn't enjoy the game, then there is something wrong with how that game was played. So adding in some form of sports component, I 100% understand why there wasn't, especially even just to sum it up in one thing is just the language barrier. Some of the players, everyone that I played with was great, but some players have thicker accents than other players, and sometimes the language barrier can cause issues. And you definitely don't want to negatively affect anyone's score sheerly because the 2 accents just don't line up. But some of the situations that I heard about kind of after the fact, or saw kind of after I'd finished my games and was just wandering around, I definitely think adding some form of sports component might have mitigated some of the kind of more negative interactions, especially like Tom mentioned, when players had to kind of math out a game, which is never a good feeling because you're basically kind of trying to convince the judge who is there, and who is just trying to get to an agreeable outcome, that sometimes someone's got to lose. That's it. Unfortunately, it might be you. If you're lucky, it might be your opponent, but there is that kind of flexibility there. And I heard one player kind of ask his friend how his game went. And he was just like, oh, it was a great game until it wasn't. And it was just referencing the fact that he had a bit of a contentious mapping out of a game against his opponent. And it was kind of, neither of them were in the wrong, but probably both of them could have done better to make it a more enjoyable end to the game.
I'm laughing at you, Henry, because there was one particular game where both players said to me on the side that their opponent slow played them. Yeah. I'm like how could you both be calling the other person slow playing, which is fascinating. That and obviously sports can be weaponized, but I can probably agree with you around the players packet, definitely getting it out open. Tom, to your point around the chess clock and Games Workshop, at least from the conversations I've been a part of, we weren't taking chess clocks off people, but when it comes to managing time, it is difficult to basically wrap up a round, get the next round ready to go, get a game to go through its natural conclusion, but still keep within a schedule. It's an interesting challenge that we need to work on. And whether we adopt chess clocks, which is a very, very, very unlikely, I would not suspect that will happen. Is every round 4 rounds? Is it like Worlds where the singles events, every game is just standardized 4 hours and it's hard dice down? Or what else can we do to kind of get games in a natural conclusion as they intentionally want it? I don't have the answer.
I think there's a very easy fixes to that, right? Like my preference is chess clocks, but I can bring my own chess clock and be like to my opponent, hey, can we play with this? And as long as that's not being taken off me, no issue. But even just having a screen or screens just situated around the room that just have a countdown timer of like, this is the round time to go.
Yeah.
So and to your point about this whole idea of slow playing, like and when a game goes to time, you have to talk it out. That comment gets thrown around a lot, which you actually can't qualify unless you've called it out during a game. You absolutely can't qualify that call, and it's unfair to do so. But if there's a round timer going on and you guys continue to do the, hey, at this point you should be up to this point, and players can visibly see where they're up to, you might have you're likely to have a higher level of identification of that as a problem, if it is a problem, or people are just more naturally inclined to have that mental thing of like, all right, roughly this is how long I've got, all that sort of stuff, and work within those parameters a little bit better.
Yeah, like the tournament organizers, for example. So myself, I would go around every table and let them know at particular milestones where they should be up to, and I'd ask them, like, Henry, what battle round are you up to? So trying to, but I hear what you're saying, and we don't want games to. It is hard. I don't have the silver bullet answer for you, and I'm conscious of time. Anything else that you would change? So I've heard time and chess clocks, and it's not necessarily chess clocks. And I know the philosophy is that, if you hear people talk about this, at least from the Games Workshop side, it's very much about sports, where sports teams don't equally have the same amount of time. But I think we saw the issues of what happens when you go overtime, when we're trying to discuss a natural conclusion at a very high level. A lot of games, it was really hard to talk through. It was incredibly hard because when the 3 hours or the 4 hours was kind of called, it was in the thick of round 3. There was plenty of bodies on the table. Anyone could have won it. It wasn't like my opponent's mostly tabled and it's very easy to work through. No, they were super technical, and we either had to make a conclusion on the spot, allow extra time, or like it was hard. It was really hard. So I think, that's probably my number one, is how do we get better at this system?
There is really there's no answer. And that's kind of the biggest thing that prompts this type of conversation is there is no one perfect answer. Like chess clocks is an answer. Longer rounds is an answer. Smaller points is an answer. None of them are necessarily the best or the worst. It's just finding that combination thereof that allows people to play the game. Like if you're, and this is kind of might be a controversial call, but if you're playing at a tournament and there's a 3 hour round, it's relatively expected that you have an hour and a half to play. if you require 2 hours to play your army, you need to choose another army.
Yeah. No. It's definitely a mindset that I bring to tournaments, right? And Tom knows this. I love to run 100 gits. Like I'll run a bunch of stabbers to my half git. But if I'm going to run a game and play it on a chess clock, I need to be able to find efficiencies in order to play my time. So, does that disincentivize those really grindy armies, like, putting all the zombies on the board? It's just a slow game. And there was times where I saw like zombies versus gits, and I was just grind, or Noble. It's just like grind. Everyone's playing as fast as they can, but it's still struggling at the 3-hour mark to have completed battle round 3. So it's like, what's the solution? And I don't think we're going to solve it here on the spot. But is there anything else that you would add in rounds to anything that you would like to see changed, or maybe even something that you really enjoyed the experience, you'd like to see it more often? Henry?
It was a fantastic event. Like, I know, like, we've been talking about kind of the issues that we had, or the recommendations we'd make for a while now. But any negatives that I had at the event were grossly outweighed by the positives. It's always easy to whinge, and everyone likes a good whinge. But no, overall, the event was absolutely fantastic. Like, the few niggly things either come down to my personal experience or my personal opinion. But no, overall, it was an amazing event. It was one of the best run tournaments that I have been to. And I've been playing tournaments for quite a while now. So, but yeah, no, like I said before, the issues that I personally had, very much teething issues. It was the first time they were running this format. They had a custom built scoring app to be able to handle everything. It was the first time they were at the venue. It was the first time kind of combining all of the different games and the grand narrative and a store and a preview release and doing the trophy presentations and doing the country medals. Like, I would be more amazed if they got it all perfect the first time. Like, it's incredibly complicated. I run tournaments myself, and after going there, I have a list of notes of, they did this amazingly. This is the standard that I need to get up to.
I think I've been on a call almost every week for about 3 to 4 months, like a 5 o'clock in the morning call. So there was a lot of work that went behind the scenes. So, we appreciate it. I'll take the credit on behalf of everyone. Like, it was a really, no. Like, it was a lot of effort that the whole team put into.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, to your point as well, next year it will be at the same venue, so it will be at the Hyatt. I think it was called the Hyatt. Yep. So it's the same venue around the same time. So I hope that we've learned a lot. I think for me, before I go to Tom for his kind of wrapping thoughts, is I would like to use the time better. So if we are going to play a tournament for 4 days, I didn't like day 2, where there was 3 games and then a shadow round, where people, like I said, Nicholas and Ronya played 4 games. And then day 3, we saw some games like starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. People on stream, when the games ran late, like, they didn't eat. Like, I think Paul Carson and I can't remember who he's playing, maybe Nicholas or Ronya or Phil, like Christopher, they weren't eating, like, because it was like 4-hour game, 15-minute break, the next round. So I think there's probably a better way we can use our time and maybe standardize the time that we play. So I think there's a lot of reflection there. But Tom, any other things you'd like to share? Or I've got one final question for you both.
Yeah, no. Like, I went in thinking feeling it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I walked away feeling like it was once in a lifetime opportunity. So, like I said, there's points of critique, and that's what they are. But outside of that, it was an incredible experience. It was truly just a joy to be there the whole way, and it was a privilege to be there, and once in a lifetime opportunity that I hope at some point gets to be a twice in a lifetime opportunity, and because it was that good. And I walked away incredibly proud of how I performed and what I was able to achieve there. So that was really special, and nothing can ever take that away.
And it's been 90 minutes now, and Tom hasn't mentioned, or I haven't mentioned, that Tom actually got awarded Best Painted at for Age of Sigmar, which first off did incredibly well on the tabletop, but also I think that must have been an honor, like being able to, because Tom, you've won plenty of painting awards. Like I don't want to like undermine you here. It's like painting awards, like you just win them, like you just rock up and people just throw it at you. But winning Best Painted at the World Championships must have been special.
Absolutely. It's been like a really cool thing, like that's actually spread out into the bigger part of my life, because I don't know if you know, I don't know if you guys know this, but we're nerds. And I've
what?
And I've hidden that like from the world pretty much my entire life. Like, you know, people know that I'm a nerd, but not like what type of nerd, just not how big of a nerd. And a lot of my friends aren't attached to this hobby or anything like that. And sort of like people knew that I was going overseas for being a nerd, and like the amount of support that I had from friends and family going over was amazing. Like, you know, it was nice to have a bit of a cheer squad, yeah, that genuine interest. And to come back and be like, hey, like I by the way, I won that. Like that's something that, like, and the like not that the praise has been like, you know, like life altering, but just been like that's an achievement. Like, as my brain fires its last synapses, I'll be like, you know, I'm so like, that's one of my really big points of pride that I did that. I went over, I represented myself really well, and yes, I did walk away with that accolade, which was yeah. I still haven't, like, I don't know if I've actually fully processed that, because that's a big deal. That one was a big deal for me.
There were some awesome painted armies.
Absolutely,
but,
yeah.
Like, you know, and it wasn't, you know, there's incredible painters as well as players. You know, Caleb Walters, for example, incredible Zinch, just to
Ricky
name one
Fisher's.
of Ricky's.
That army was insane. I was expecting that to take it out, to be perfectly honest. I was like, that was great.
And that's just tipping the iceberg. Like, there was a lot of great armies. Yeah. So kudos to you, mate. Thanks, very man. Well deserved, very proud. And that's why, like, poor old Tom was sick at the time. We're like, if you could get out of your deathbed just for half an hour, please come.
I actually got up, walked down the aisle to get the award. And Mika from the Netherlands, who we'd sort of become a bit friendly with, her and her husband were unreal. They were playing Kill Team. But we just sort of bumped into them and kept talking to them. She like ran up, took a photo, and like with my phone, and I walked back down the aisle, and she's walking back down alongside me, and I grabbed my phone and walked straight back out the hall to go and throw up again. That virus that was going around was pretty brutal.
Yeah, it even knocked out a few of the TOs just to, yeah, it was crazy towards the end. I'm so glad to have dodged it, because but Henry, what would you say to somebody who maybe is listening to this and inspired to win a golden ticket, or maybe is a tournament organizer who is thinking about applying? And by the way, in the episode description, if you want to apply for a ticket, there is a application and a reapplication. So if you had a ticket last year or this year, you can reapply for next year. If you didn't get a ticket this year, you can apply for next year. And there's a little qualifier thing. And yeah, put your hat in the ring and obviously aspire to be a TO with the golden ticket. But Henry, what would you say to someone listening who's maybe aspiring to attend or run an event that has a golden ticket for this opportunity?
Well, hopefully in 5 months, I'll be able to tell you what it's like to run an event with a golden ticket, because I have applied to get a golden ticket for Contest of Fools. So I haven't got a confirmation one way or the other yet. So still hoping out for that. But if you're going to events to try and get a golden ticket, like if you want to attend the World Championships of Warhammer, do it. 100%. You will likely have an absolutely fantastic experience. You will meet kick-ass other players that will play at the absolute top level, and it will be, like Tom said, a once in a lifetime experience. Like, it is a huge achievement to get there. But prefacing all that, you will be rubbing shoulders with the best of the best. So you definitely need to know how to lose graciously. Like, I personally had 1 win, 2 draws, and 5 losses. I am 100% happy with how I played, but if I went purely over there to win the whole thing, I'd be very disappointed. I went over there, have an awesome time, to play some amazing games, to make lifelong friends, and to sneakily advertise my business. But it was an awesome experience. So I would 100% recommend, if anyone gets the opportunity to take it, it's going to be something that you're going to remember for the rest of your life. But definitely temper your expectations. Simply knowing that you can hang with the best of the best is a huge achievement. Even if you don't get the final win or get the podium or get into the championship bracket, you made it to the World Championships of Warhammer. Like, that's applause worthy already.
Yeah, everyone who went there is a winner in their own right. So nicely said. Tom, what would you say to them?
Do it. Like, and I think the more that this sort of thing can get up and running, the better. Like, I was really impressed in the lead up to it, because events started throwing these tickets, you know, and amazingly threw some support behind it as well. Like, you know, kudos to you, coach, and the guys who are in Sydney Slaughter, and, you know, Josh down in Melbourne. Like, that's a big thing to be able to offer to people. And if that happens and a community builds around it, that's awesome. And what I didn't see in the lead up to it was, like, you know, because that's putting stakes on the table, right? Like, that's putting pretty big incentive to do well at an event. And I didn't see that like becoming an issue at any event that I went to. Like, nobody was like, I'm about to like step on my grandma's neck to get a ticket happening. So like, I think that what it does foster is just this really incredible community of like celebrating representatives and getting that up and running. And I would so go back again. And I hope that I can. You know, hopefully I don't just start playing like a numpty, and maybe do qualify for 2024's Worlds. And I'd love to go back over with the guys. Like, you know, the 5 players that we had, could not have asked for a better group of guys. You know, David, who brought his brother Dava, Joel, Mitch, and Christian, who came along, and of course Henry and JL, who, you know, and I've been talking to absolutely everyone since we got back. Like, it formed, like, going over and being part of a team, and, you know, having that support network over there, and just the most like wonderful, positive people was what made the trip for me. Like, I wasn't going to the World. Weirdly, I wasn't going to the World Championships of Warhammer to win the World Championships of Warhammer. Like, I knew that was never going to be a realistic expectation. My hope was to like not lose 8 games, and just have a great time and meet some incredible people. And I had that in spades. You know, and I think that it was a great thing too, in terms of the lead up to it, and, you know, our friends that did get to go. You know, we're trying hard at playing Warhammer, and trying to do well at it, but I don't think anybody was like sacrificing their sanity or their mental health to do it. Like, it wasn't like, you know, if I don't win, well, boy, like, is that gonna, like, the attitude from pretty much everybody that I met over there and that we went with was awesome. So I think that's a big thing to be mindful of as well, is, you know, we play this game because we love it, not because we like, you know, we're all about winning. It's just about representing and having fun and enjoying the game and getting out of it what you put into it. So like, I hope people get to keep playing at these events that qualify. I hope people keep getting to go to the World Championships. But just that, remember, like, you know, you're there to have fun and just have fun in the whole process. Because AOS, you know, is and I've said this from the moment I started playing the game. There are like games that have, like, you know, the cleaner competitive rule sets that exist, right? Like, but that's not why I play AOS. Like, AOS is like, you know, I love it because it's fun. Like, and every game is fun, and the community is fun, and events for it are fun, and that really should just continue to be the emphasis of what people do this for. Like, don't get too hung up on outcome. Just get hung up on being part of it and getting into it.
To close it off, and just in the spirit of community and spirit, it might be worth calling out just the Georgia Warband, for example, who I think were the holy trinity of what a great community looks like. These folks picked people up at the airport, even at like midnight and stupid o'clock in the morning. Some of these people put them in their own house and, allowed them to stay to save money. These people, one person forgot their army in an Uber on their way to the tournament to fly over, and someone literally grabbed an army, got there, like got the exact same models from the community, and got them to that player to be able to play. That's just a small sample of the things that the Georgia Warband did. So
even beyond that, I don't know if you heard the story that happened with our friend Mitch, who got deathly ill. Like I think he was one of the first people who got hit with that illness, and alone,
Kevin.
like he was staying by himself. It was Kevin. Like Mitch just put out he was like, I think that I was like, he was on the verge of needing to go to hospital. Like he was that sick. It was really bad. 2 a.m. had been throwing up, had been like dehydrated out the wazoo. And Kevin just online was like, no worries, man. Like where are you? Like, let me know. 2 a.m. in the morning, drove around, got him medicine, got him supplies and dropped it. Like you don't get that unless you meet like the nicest group of people on the face of the earth. So that to me was just like, that is a Superman moment. Like that is an amazing thing that community brought to that event, was just that level of support and positivity.
Yeah, and I think that's a great reflection. And by the way, don't get wings from Hooters, as Mitch has learned. Hooters wings off the table. But more importantly, though, I think it's just a great reflection of the community. And on that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, Tom, if people want to chat to you and find more, or if people want to see your army, man, like see this award-winning army, what's your Twitter? What's your Instagram handle? Sorry.
So the best place to get in touch with me is through Instagram, and my painting account is Tomo Paints, Tomo Paints. So you can see all my stuff up there.
I'll put a link in the episode description.
Perfect.
Go check it out. Go give him a follow, and go check out his award-winning Nurgle army. Any shout-outs?
Heaps. But first and foremost, definitely my wife, who was just the most amazing supportive person. When she found out I was going, she was like, yeah, that's awesome. Like you should absolutely go to that. And it's just been incredible the whole way through. This is pretty big life stuff, so we get to do that. But then just, these in the entire Australian community, just amazing. And I'm so proud to be part of it, and so proud to have represented it with amazing people, better people than me.
Henry.
I've also got to shout out my wife. It'd be a bit awkward if I didn't, because I know she does watch these videos. But yeah,
happy birthday from yesterday, JL.
Happy birthday, JL. I hope Mitch didn't steal any of your cake, mate.
But yeah, shouting at her. She was an amazing traveling companion. Really helped out, and she turned into the mother for the whole team. As much as we weren't a team, we all hung out the whole time. We all went out for dinner. And she just turned into the mother for everyone, just helped out everyone, which was amazing. But yeah, same as Tom said, like the whole Australian community, like the fact that we are able to play at such a high level is because the rest of the community supports everyone. And I could list 20 players straight off the top of my head, other Australians that 100% they deserve the chance to go over, to go over and play. And that only happens if you have an absolutely fantastic community. And tons of people behind you that are keen to support you and push you to be as the best that you can be. But yeah, a shout out to G-Dub as well for putting this on. Yeah. It's a huge opportunity. So we want to see it happen again. I want to see more people go over. I want to see other Australians go over, have an awesome trip, make kick-ass friends. And I'm pumped to see the rest of everyone that we traveled with. I'm pretty sure we're all going to be at CanCon early next year. And some of the in-jokes that we have now they're just going to be legendary. So
awesome. Tom, Henry, thank you so much for your time. Apologize to your role-playing group, Henry. Your RPG, not if you were on cosplay and do some things, I'm not. You do you, mate. I'm not outing you at all. But Tom, Henry, thank you so much for your time. I hope if you have been watching this video, you have got some new insights. If people want to learn more about the World Championships, I've done a video with Tom Meggans where we actually previewed the meta and what the event was looking like. On my YouTube Shorts, I have a couple of videos from the actual event. So I actually previewed and show you what the actual day looked like. And I actually interviewed the winner, Nicholas Tasson. So if you want to hear about how he won and what he did to kind of win the event, that is also up on YouTube. So I think this is the end of my World Championship kind of coverage, and we can all focus to the next Battle Scroll and Flesh Eater Courts and what General's Handbook 2024 might look like. But thank you both for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and you know the deal, like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. Until next time, thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers, Coach.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.